Good afternoon, good morning, whatever time this thing is possibly running on MCAT channel. Welcome back to Poets in Montana. I'm Mark Gibbons, and I am the current Poet Laureate in the state of Montana. And we are listening to people in Montana who are poets, and today's guest on this particular episode is Tammy Halland. And Tammy is a former Montana Poet Laureate from 2013 to 2015. She is, like myself and several other poets that you'll hear on this broadcast, a lifelong resident of Montana. She went to college at the University of Montana and got a master's degree in literature, and went on to get an MFA, a Master's of Fine Arts degree at Bennington College. And she has been teaching at Montana State University Billings. Did you say something, Tammy?
No.
Okay, she's been teaching at we're on the Zoom, and this is we're Zooming for the first time, so bear with all this. But she's been at Billings, Montana State University Billings for quite some time now. How long, Tammy?
This is my 27th year.
Yeah, that's a while. Yeah, you've been there a long time. So a lot of people have benefited from her as an instructor, and have heard her poetry across the country. I rather than try to go into all of that biographical detail about Tammy, we'll just kind of cover that maybe in some of our conversation here back and forth. But to begin with, Tammy, why don't you just read a few poems for us and give the folks a sense of what you do, and then we'll chat about some of that.
Okay, thanks. That sounds great. And I just want to thank you for inviting me. This sounds like a lot of fun, this next 45 minutes or so.
I hope so.
I'll just start with a poem that I begin with at many readings. It's called Lipstick. I wonder how they do it. Those women who put lipstick on their lips without looking, after they've eaten a meal or when they travel in cars. Satin claret or plum or peach or pecan. I can't stay inside the lines, late comer to lipstick that I am, and sometimes get messy even in front of a mirror. But these women know where lips end and plain skin begins, probably know how to put their hair in a knot with a single pin.
I love that poem. Yeah.
So that one is from the first book, and actually I realized midway through that I had changed one of the words, but that's okay. People can look it up if they want. And then I will just share a couple of others. The two I have at right now are from the second book, When We Wake in the Night. And I'll just read the title poem. Those of you who sleep through don't know what you're missing. Late constellations, owls in tamarack, shadows on carpet, cool floors. We know who leaves lights on. We know when the morning paper arrives, how the carrier idles her car, parks, walks 3 houses, and goes. In the dark, the leaden feeling of children growing away pulls for attention. The son who didn't get his swing set no longer needs one. If we sit on the porch in summer or fall, maybe we hear a gray catbird, its single descending call over water. It likes sumac, yellow dock, the dark.
Nice.
Thank you. And I'll just read one more, and maybe then we can chat a bit.
Yeah.
This one I almost never read, but I thought, why not? It's a little darker, but I'm not going to qualify it a bunch. It's just called Your Emergency Waits. If you haven't met it, you will. It sits somewhere on a sofa watching reruns until the time is right. It will come to your door and cross your threshold unannounced. No matter how you think it will look, how you may have planned, it will find ways to surprise you. This is the advantage of time. Hasn't it waited for this moment? Didn't it always foresee this collision? You will gasp, maybe cry or shriek. Your emergency has offered you this gift. It will lean into you. It will become a familiar weight against your shoulder. Sooner or later, you will put your arm around it. You will learn the pattern of its breath, how it occurs despite your panic in a steady and predictable way. It will look in your refrigerator, shuffle your papers. Your emergency will learn your floor plan. And in time, it will call you home. It will become so ordinary, it will be invisible to strangers, as subtle as the scar where a pine splinter from the playground drove into your shin. At the time, it seemed like terrible damage.
Cool. Was that from your second book also, or?
That's from the second book, yes.
Yeah, I love the way that I remember one of the things when I was in grad school, and I was in grad school probably after you were, because I was kind of a late bloomer, and but it was that sort of postmodern kind of era, and so much focus on the I, as in the EYE, over the I, the capital I in poetry. They were just like dissing that observer, that I, the personal aspect in poems, and focusing more on the things and the stuff in the world. And I see in your work, in that first book, because that's what I spent the last 48 hours in, so much of a balance of those two things. So much a balance of the personal is in every single poem. You can't avoid it. Mm-hmm. You are there, not maybe you as a person, but you're the voice in the poem is there. It's a human entity. It's a very human situation. And then there's all this wonderful stuff, the observation, the paying attention, whether it's, I love that the second one, when you're laying in bed and observing the stuff you're not sleeping, the stuff that's going on around you. And then there's several poems in that book also I notice are dream related poems. And I just love how that seems to be the essence of what poetry is all about for me, is to capture and to find those little moments. And I think you do that wonderfully in your work. It's very, very powerful work in that regard. That lipstick poem is so simple, I mean, it's just so simple, but it's not. It's way beyond that. But it's just that moment. It's just that gesture. It's just that circumstance, and that's just great poetry as far as I'm concerned.
Well, thank you. I mean, I do think it's interesting you mentioned gesture. I do think in gesture, I mean, sometimes the subtlest movement can just suggest so much. And as you say, the moment, I mean, so I've always found it a bit artificial to completely negate the I. I mean, we are humans living in the world, this is sort of our given state. And so if we're not willing to embrace that, or if we're always trying to be outside of that, at least for me, there seems something kind of false in that.
Yeah.
A sort of kind of artificial division. At the same time, I think that, as you say, the I voice is often a character of some sort. It's not necessarily
Right.
who the person is. Even when it's really close to the person, it's a persona. It's
Right.
like a mask,
Right.
right? Um, and I always feel like I'm working in service to the poem.
Yeah.
You know, so whatever my experience has been, it's not that I'm trying to get that down, right?
Right.
I might have some experience. It might instigate a poem. After that, it's the poem, and I've got to figure out
And
how to work with it.
and sometimes it may be someone else's experience that you have heard, and then you have taken it into yourself, because so much a part of this whole business is the idea of empathy, right?
Yeah.
Trying to put
Yeah,
yourself in other people's situations. That's what the poem invites us in to do. Yeah, I think your work does that exceptionally well. Yeah.
wow.
You know, along that line of gesture or action or the what the hell was the name of it? It was in your first book, and it was such a simple little poem, and it was in the beginning, and it was the poem that's titled "When I'm 39." Do you remember this poem? Uh-oh, we've hit a frozen moment. This may be one of those moments that Ron has to edit out. Yeah, so one of the poems that I saw in your first book that I read along the idea of just a gesture and a moment, a human moment, was a poem you had in your first book called "When I'm 39."
Oh, yeah.
Would you read?
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, the clock ticks.
Yeah, the clock ticks. Yeah, I can read that. I just have to find it. You know, I just have to say, too, that this book came out again this year in a second edition,
Right.
20 years later,
Right.
which is, it still kind of startles and surprises me that that happened. But
Yeah,
I'm very
well,
happy.
it deserves to. It's a wonderful book. And, you know, in poetry books, they never get much recognition to begin with. But the fact that it could come out again just shows that it's a great book. Yeah.
Okay, so, and my son Nathan is featured here. When I'm 39, Nathan sings, "Love is like a magic penny. Hold it tight and you won't have any. The teeth he will lose next year cut into peanut butter and jelly. He makes crumbs. It could go on forever, me smiling across the table at sticky lips. Hey, Mom," he says, "you know what I do when my friends are sad?" He whacks his fist against his head like Curly in the Three Stooges. "Why?" I ask. "Because it makes them smile," he says.
It was just to me, it was like that stupid commercial that with a have Mikey,
Yeah.
he likes it. Just the behavior of kids at a young age, and the stuff they say just spontaneously is like, oh yeah, what? Because it makes them smile. You know, it's like, yeah, duh. Why wouldn't you do it? You know, it's like, but that's a great poem. I mean, that's not something that you would think of as a poem off the top of your head, I don't think, you know.
No, but you were mentioning the observer, I
Yeah.
think earlier, that idea of observing, and you are also mentioning a sort of postmodern quality. But when you watch children, how spontaneously and quickly they will change. So we start with the penny, and then he's eating, and then he's at whacking his head like the Three Stooges, and the sort of obvious answer, well, of course, it makes them smile. How can you not get that? And as grown-ups, we can become more linear, more cerebral, more all of those things, but the kid is still there, just sort of bouncing around in those associations. And I was always fascinated with that. I adored, hanging out with my kids. I still adore it.
Yeah.
They're grown-ups now.
Yeah. Yeah. How old are your kids?
26 and 32.
All right. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Mine are just one's 34. Will be 35, I guess, coming up here soon, and then the other's 38. So they're just a little bit older, but
Yeah.
I still remember exactly what that's like. Those children. Yeah, and you do a wonderful job of that, and also in several poems, I thought about this pile of clutter that exists behind me in this room, and I thought of 2 or 3 different poems where you are, you are cleaning, you are clamoring to clean up, and I say you, the voice in the poem is worried about this stuff that they have to get done, on top of the fact that they're writing a poem to you, and I think that's something that comes from our generation, that was given to us by our parents' generation. This cleanliness thing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, why be so compulsive? Why lose sleep in your head over the fact that the bed's not made or the dishes aren't done? But we come from that ethic, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I I agree. I feel it that it's very familiar. In fact, if you don't mind, I have a poem sort of about that,
Let's do it.
somewhat like that. There's a lot of cleaning in the first book, but this one's called Scandinavians in the High Plains. This land made us silent. We could endure because that's what we do. You know the joke. You can always tell a Norwegian. Too stubborn, usually, to quit, but you can't tell him much. It's what made the lake joyful, why we yearned for it, and our mother, Pennsylvania Dutch and looking perpetually for more work, rarely wanted to go. But is that true? It's what we assumed. Maybe she was as burdened as the rest of us. This was our guilt. No matter how much we managed, it was never enough. Still, sometimes we went to the water with our classy wooden boat that took us far into the distance and let us feel wind made by speed. We watched the pattern of waves rise and fall behind us until we were at ease. As I think of it now, it seems we hardly visited that place.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think that was part of the characteristic of what you're talking about, and what, there was always work to be done. If you were bored, they would give you something to do.
It's a tribal thing, it's a survival thing. It's a be prepared. That's one of the things, I guess, that I don't know if I've talked about this with a few other people that I've been doing this with, but it's something I talk about with friends and all the time. It's one of those observations that we're making, and it's not a diss or anything, because I mean, I'm the first to say that I'm one of the most spoiled human beings that ever was born. but the fact of the matter is that even I have become less and less engaged in the way that I used to be when I was younger and when I was closer to my parents' generation, and when you really had to worry about survival, when you really had to be prepared for being this time of year stranded for a week or two, or whatever. You needed to make sure that all those things were in place. And now we are so modernized and so on this grid of one of the things I remember was when I was a kid growing up, of course, there was no such thing in where I lived as central heating, or those kinds of things, or where gas was piped literally to your house. And it was like, you're never going to get cold. You had to worry about these things, about heat and about food and about shelter. And these things they're not as pivotal anymore. And and people are less and less engaged in working class sort of ways, human interactions, like work, like farm related type of existence. So, and I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means in terms of playing out who we are as human beings into the future. These generations, the younger generations now will figure all that out, and I'll be long gone. But it is interesting to see this pivotal change.
Yeah, I mean, it is, and who knows what it means, as you say.
Exactly. Yeah, I do not know what it means, but
I mean, I think there's still a lot in certain fields. There's still a lot of, heavy labor involved, long hours, all of that sort of thing in certain fields. But yeah, I have no answers on that front.
No, it's just it seems like it's just one of those things that old people say, by God, because it's the horizon disappearing behind you, and all the things that were associated with it are no longer there, and you wonder if that's something lost, or if that's just the side effect of progress and moving forward.
Well, and there's always the risk that memory is inaccurate too. That's a big deal.
oh yeah, exactly. And not to mention just natural built-in nostalgia and sentimentalism, of which I've been accused many times, and I would venture to say that you've probably been accused of too.
Yeah, that could be. I mean, people have described my work as gritty, as sometimes demonstrating the darker side of things, which I don't know.
Well, I think, to me, that's what keeps it from you have to balance that sort of sentiment, that basic love instinct that's in your poetry. That's very much in your poetry, particularly as a parent, or as a child, and as a spouse. Those kinds of elements that I see anyway. You have to balance that maybe with the harder realities of what life's all about, and I see that over and over again in this book. In the Breath in Every Room book, is all of that animal blood and guts reality that also transfers into human, as in what is the in the last part of this first book, which this is the first copy. This is like the old copy. There's the new copy. Cool. The last section, it seemed to me, in this book, the first book was kind of a little what I would call more experimental, or it ventured out in ways that the first three sections didn't seem to. You know what I mean? Is that kind of something?
Yeah, I think that is certainly true.
But there's on page 72, or 72 in this book, but it's burying the placenta.
Oh, yes.
Would you read that?
Sure. Frozen for 16 weeks, it comes out of its bowl into my hands, and I understand now how the membrane spiraled from the base of the cord to carry my son. I kneel over this knee-deep hole near the comfrey, let it slip from my hands, cloddy and whole, as beautiful as frogs' eggs at the river's edge, or a red clay washed down from a cliff. My hands push dirt, a night crawler falls in, and my fingers smooth the soil. I sprinkle sage on wet ground, feel my heart pound, the finality of the thing.
That's an incredible poem. I think that's an incredible poem. It's like on so many levels. It's just an incredible poem, and particularly on that level of animal human connection or whatever. I'm sorry, I get a little.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Sorry.
No, no apologies necessary. I'm on.
Wow.
I have not revisited that poem for a very long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the examination of that that one moment, or the examination of the placenta, and then just the letting it slip, and the clotty aspects, the blood, the dirt, the earthiness, and the and then just the, yeah. Anyway, that's a great poem. Thank you for reading that poem.
You're welcome.
Is there another one that you have that you want to share? Or anything that you want to say? Give me a chance to catch my breath here.
Catch your breath. Well, let me share a new one.
Cool.
This one's called The Practice of Trees. The yard would like to become a forest, seedlings thick as grass. For a long time I mowed and pulled, but they have no regard for, they have no regard for lawn and no limit. Ponderosa, spruce, linden, lilac. Let's just wait for the phone. Sorry.
Yeah.
I messed this up anyway, so.
So I'll just stop. Go for it.
So I'll show this new one. It's called The Practice of Trees. The yard would like to become a forest, seedlings thick as grass. For a long time I mowed and pulled, but they have no regard for lawn and no limit. Ponderosa, spruce, linden, lilac, maple, cherry, oak. A tricky lot. They shoot up in secret and dig deep. Why not let them live? Never mind neighbors who keep weeds from cracks in their sidewalks and square edge their lawns. These stems have already hardened into bark. Now, if I trim a branch, I fear pain in the severed limb. Mostly, I listen. When I ask what the trees want, the answer comes back. Love us.
Nice. Yeah. And, I mean, I think that to me that it also is a reflection of, well, at least for me personally, for like this mess behind me, it is a kind of a letting go. As I've gotten older, I've let go of so many things I've worried about doing, like lawn care or things like that. When it's like, why? It's like it was just things that we goals and things we set for ourselves, but really, what were we losing in the process, or what was more important, maybe, as opposed to just getting the napkins folded in order and whatever.
Yeah, it is a letting go. And it's also, I mean, I find that I feel that, deeper respect. I mean, those little seedlings are amazing.
Yeah.
How they shoot up so fast and they harden it, they've implanted themselves before you get a chance, really, to think that you're going to get rid of them. And then you develop these attachments to them. And what if you do hurt them, if you pull them up or cut them down?
Right.
It's just a very different perspective from what I used to have.
They're toddlers before you know it.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. They're, I go back to places now because you move on in just ways, even though I've lived in this area pretty much all of my life, or the majority of it. And I still try to go back to places that I've always had strong attachments to, but I don't get to as often as I used to. So sometimes years go by and I go back to this trail or whatever, and it's like, whoa, this is really quite different. I mean, things have grown up, or somebody's come in and logged something, other things have happened that have really changed your perspective. And yeah, which goes back to memory again.
Exactly. Yeah, we recreate those things in our memory, and then sometimes again they aren't as accurate as we thought they were.
Exactly.
Too.
Right. Yeah.
During this whole you know, pandemic stretch, I've been hiking nearly every day, and I've just developed also such an affection for the trails and the woods and the trees, individual trees, and how they look in certain light. And I just am so fascinated by it.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you live in town or close in Billings or?
I'm in town, but we have amazing trails kind of off into the rim rocks. So you can, and they're full of little, you know, microclimate areas. So you can hike sort of in and out of forest, in and out of prairie. Um, you know, we have in the spring, for example, you know, you always think of yucca and sage in this part of the world
Right.
around Billings, but you can hike through a little forested path and find shooting stars and yellow bells and all the kinds of things you would find up in the mountains.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and we have a decent trail system here too in Missoula, and actually, I'm lucky enough, knock on wood, to still be in a house, being able to still be in a house fairly close to Mount Sentinel over here in the university area, kind of, and so you can be, and that trail system will take you up into Patty Canyon and even that, I mean, up on like Jumbo and on Waterworks Hill, and you'll find Bitterroots and stuff up there. It's a real dry, because it's all south facing, open hillsides, and you can find a lot of that almost prairie type flora up there too. But anyway, it is nice to be able to have that, to be able to get out of town and because I mean, things are getting bigger. Billings is obviously bigger than Missoula, but Missoula is going through sort of growing spurts right now too, and it's more change, as life changes. That's the way it works. But nice to be able to get outside.
Oh yeah.
You do you have something else that you want to share, Reed? Because I have a couple to ask you about after you read something that you want to share.
I will read. I'll read a couple from the final two poems from What Does Not Return. Is that okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So part of this book goes off into the East Coast and around a ferry going out to Provincetown from Boston, things like that. So What Does Not Return is set, in that ferry ride, really, and somewhat on the beach. And then I'll come back to the Beartooth Mountains for Deer on Crazy Creek. What does not return? I took an oyster, a hinged wonder, from the small bay because of its glistening apricot surface, sculpted like the half shells in the sand, then kept it, admiring its beauty, noting that without water, it lost part of its shine. After a day or two, I noticed darkness beneath its iridescent shell. Dead, I supposed. And then I felt a responsibility, at least, to put it where it belonged. I took it in my purse and planned to return it to water, but every time I forgot. Thinking the open shells on the shore would be my reminder, I became so enamored with their fragments catching the sun, I had to walk away from so much light. In the ferry going back to the mainland, I saw my first whale and couldn't stay in my seat, thrilled at the arc of its slick blackness emerging, then immersing. I thought, here I am again, failing to put to rest the past, the thing shriveling in the interior, while this creature, already a memory, overtakes what cannot be undone.
Wow.
Deer on Crazy Creek. And this poem references Leslie Marmon Silko's Yellow Woman story. Along the trail, I think how risky the venture, the signs that say don't go alone into bear country. I can see miles except in aspen. Walking uphill in sage, I think of Yellow Woman, of the stranger who finds her and takes her into another life. It's after that, after coming from a grove of trees, I climb on a huge split boulder and watch an ant navigate a forest of lichens. When I raise my eyes to the horizon, I see you, the deer. I see you, the way you hold your head, ambling along the trail, the sway of your body on this path made long before humans managed and mapped this place. You are doing what we do, head down, step ahead, step ahead. When you look up and I begin to speak, you stop, deciding whether to bolt or continue, a turn for us both. I wonder, do your thoughts go to the bear at the edge of the mind, the long trail with golden butterflies on sage, flies that chase and bite? Do you understand what calls and calls again from an aspen horizon?
Nice. Nice. You know, the whole the whole experience of hearing poetry, of experiencing poetry or any art form for that matter, is you know, it has to do with me. It's all about me, right? I mean, that's what we do. That's what we go to art, and it's all about me. Your art is all about me. And the same thing is true for you when you go to something, right? I mean, that's what we do. We make it ours somehow. And we appreciate it for what it is, but it's triggering all these things inside of us. And that's what makes it so goddamn powerful, right? And one of the things that I noticed in that poem, I mean, and not merely because of your reference to Leslie Marmon Silko's story, but it is just that that close observation of flora and fauna, of being there and wondering and trying to empathize with animal and plant life, trying to be connected to everything around you that is so much a gift from native people of this country, of where we're at, right? I lived on the Flathead Reservation for about 8 years, and I went up there to teach, and so I lived there for a while, and during that time was kind of that pivotal moment of change in my life from just, you know, trying to be a teacher, and I was a parent and father and husband, but I really wanted to, you know, tell my story. I wanted to write my poems, and so I decided I needed to go back to school and do something to really sort of focus myself more on that. And part of the trigger of that was the death of my father, and the reality that came to me was that your life is very short, and you should do what you need to do. And so I went to this one meeting that some people had, and it was an Indian guy who was creating this kind of a circle of people that got together, and then he sort of shared this sort of, you know, native philosophy with people. Not all of us were white people, but you know, several of us were, and I always think that that's one of the great gifts that I've been given in life, because after that was one of the things that helped to kind of heal that feeling of loss when I went through that experience, was going up. I used to walk up North Crow Creek, like every day, just to get up there and to get into the mountains and to get into that poem you just read for us, to do just that kind of thing, and sort of reconnect myself. And I think that's what poetry, I think, can help people achieve that. And that's what that poem that you just read, I think it does to a great extent. It helps people get back to that place that maybe they've never even been to fully before, but it pulls them in, and that's a powerful thing to be able to do. I think that's one of the reasons why it's valid to keep doing the kinds of things that we do.
Yeah. Yes, if poetry needs validity, I mean, we can't necessarily predict where it's going to go, but that's where it does go a lot of times, is into that.
Well, I mean, yeah, all you can do is kind of try to be honest.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what that poem does, is it just puts us right there in that human experience. But it is the effort of that speaker in the poem to show you all this and to bring you into this place. And I think that's a success story for a poet, anyway.
Yeah.
A couple of interesting poems. In regard to, I said, I thought that fourth section in this book was a bit of a change from what I had read and enjoyed thoroughly prior to that. But the last two poems in this book, they're very short. The first one is called "In the Sky Over Water," and the last poem is 1105. If you wouldn't mind, I'd love to hear those.
Thank you. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Okay. In the Sky Over Water. She is a thin, clear note in the sky over water. Until the song is through, she is sound, not flesh. It would be so easy to arrive, to become the last note and then the echo before silence. But she wants to be what lasts and does not last. Not the last note, but the one before. 1105. This is my tired poem when the ash leaves turn and willows by the river sift theirs to the ground. This is my turning in poem, my singing poem about the dog curled into old blankets and cats rattling dishes in the sink. This is for sleep, for you who have begun to sink into the deep water of dreams, where I am swimming to meet you in tall weeds and we wait for the next big fish. This is my swimming poem, when we rise to its belly, hold to its spiked fins, and follow it into the open waters of this lake.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I love, that's another aspect of you can fall in love with everything, I think, that's out there, if you really want to pay attention. And so much of the poetry that I like is almost like you can't really put your finger on it. I mean, I remember that as a young person, when I first heard Eliot or something like that, and it was like, what the hell? But there was something about it, that there was just the mystery of it, and the language and the rhythms of it, that just it just grabbed me, and I knew that I was going to be in love with something, because I guess maybe it's a lot like life. We don't know what the hell's going on. I don't anyway know what is going on. And so if you can capture some little essence of that in language, it's almost like a lullaby that it doesn't have to make sense, even in the way that we try to make sense out of things, because I'm constantly trying to make sense out of things. But
I think too, we often don't demand that of, say, rock lyrics, that
Hmm.
they make sense. We're willing to go with it.
Right.
And we know that our mood shifts in relation to the music. And I feel like there is that similar undercurrent in poetry.
Mm-hmm.
That sometimes it's having an effect on your mood because of the sounds that are coming together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Not necessarily the story that may be coming out or the characters or the voice. It's something else that is working on a very in a subconscious way on
Right.
us.
Right.
And I think we should be generous with poetry that way. As you say, it doesn't have to make sense. And particularly because, we're often, I think about this, we talked about the I voice earlier, but the I is a really complicated thing because it involves memory and imagination and all that goes on internally that never makes it out into the sort of external biography of anybody.
Right.
And if we just sort of lift the barriers and let those things do their work, I mean, we get into this place where it seems like it's experimental or abstract maybe, but
Yeah.
it's coming from someplace very authentic.
And very human.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
there is that element that seems to be for me necessary. It seems to me that, I mean, there are, and again, it just may be my mood, because every time I go, it's like memory, right? I mean, I read a book and it's like, well, okay, and then I come back to it later. It's like, oh my God.
It's brilliant. Yes.
And and so there's that. But there is definitely some stuff that I've gone back to, 4 or 5 or 6 times, trying to like this, but
Yeah.
it's just, it doesn't have an element of humanity in it. It doesn't feel like it's got uh, that sort of humanness in there for me. And so that's why I tend to just say, well, this is fine. And somebody may really dig this, but I'm not going to waste any more time on this for myself.
Yeah.
I have to move on. There's too much to consume in the world, I guess.
Right. Well, I mean, we all have, right. We all have our proclivities. And I
Yeah.
think it's nice to honor that rather than having, poetry wars or something, fighting over what's the best. It's
Oh, totally.
way
Yeah.
better
Right.
just to,
It's like, it's like going to the record store, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
you
We
choose what you want, right?
many, many voices and
Right. Yeah.
approaches.
And
Yeah.
every once in a while, you decide to get risky and frisky and go out on a limb and try something new.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that happens a lot with poetry. There's a lot out there. So, anything else that you want to add or read or anything?
Well, I just really appreciate being here and I'm grateful to you. And I think this was a lot of fun. So
I had fun. I really
thank you so
thank you for
much.
agreeing to do this, and I think that this will be another great addition to whatever comes out of this catalog of Montana voices. I knew I wanted you in it, and I'm so glad that we were able to do this, even though it's in this Zoomy format. Maybe we'll see each other in Billings at some point and be able to
In
sit
real
out in the
life.
studio.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe then we could do the old the back and forth thing.
Sure.
It's like I remember years ago doing that for the first time with Greg Keeler in Bozeman, and because I had been used to, like, reading, and then somebody else would read, and so
Yeah.
I asked him. I said, "So, what do you think?" And he said, "Well, why don't I read one, and then you read one back at me, and we'll just kind of
Yeah.
and I thought, well, that sounds like fun, and it was.
Yeah. It is big fun to do that.
Yeah.
We did it once with Greg and Henrietta Goodman and Earl Craig and me. The thing is, I read right after Greg, every time. And he was reading this stuff that was so funny. And then I would be giggling and I'm supposed to come up with something, you know, to respond to that. And so it put me in an awkward position. But
Yeah,
it was a blast.
yeah, that's true. You know, there's there's only so many comic poems that I can pull out of my hat. My wife keeps saying, you should write more funny poems, you know, more
Funny stuff.
happy poems instead of all this
Yeah.
doom and
Yeah.
gloom. But anyway, we do what we do. Thank you for joining me, Tammy. And remember, check out Tammy Halland, TamiHaaland, TammyHalland.com to see more about Tammy. And next week we'll do another one. Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you so much.
Got a lifetime filled